Now let's look at two-step equations. So two-step equations are one step further than a one-step, obviously. And there's one extra trick that I've taught my classes to help remember this. Whenever you have an x, you want them to end up alone, especially in math class. So looking at this, I always want to deal with my best friend first, the one that's not attached to the x. And then I want to go and break up the x from their new boyfriend or girlfriend. For each of these steps, I'm following the same steps I used for one step. I first do inverse, then both sides, then I do the math. So looking at this, the best friend would be that subtracting of a 12. So my inverse operation of subtracting is adding. So I'm going to add 12 to both sides. So now I've got, that gets rid of it. So I bring down my 2. I have 2x equals 18 plus 12 is 30. Now, a lot of us want to stop here, but you're not done because your x is not completely alone. In order to get the x alone, we need to do the inverse operation. Well, 2 is currently being multiplied by x, which I know that because they're right next to each other. So to do the inverse, I need to do division. So I divide both sides by 2. And 30 divided by 2 is 15. Let's look at the next one. 19 plus 8x equals 115. So sometimes we get confused because our x is not in the front. But you still use the same steps. You start with the best friend, then you do the inverse on both sides and work it out. So 19 is currently positive. I need to do the inverse, which means I'm going to subtract it to make it 0. But remember, I have to do it on both sides. I bring down my 8x, and now I have, 96. Okay, so 8x equals 96. Well, as you know, I'm not done because my x is not alone. Currently, 8 and x are being multiplied, so I need to do the opposite. The opposite would be divide, so I divide both sides by 8. 96 divided by 8 is 12, so that means that x equals 12. Let's look at the next one. We have 25 equals 15 plus x over 5. So if it makes you more comfortable to rewrite this to where the equal sign's on the other side, you can. So if you want to rewrite it like that so that that's easier for you to understand, feel free. I'm going to leave it the other way just so I can show you how to do it. So your goal is still to get the x alone. So I need to move this 15 to the other side. I do that by subtracting 15 from each side. I'm left with 10 equals x over 5. Now, x over 5 is written as a fraction, and I've taught my classes that fractions are just another way to write a division problem. Well, what's the opposite of a division problem? Well, you should know that it's multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 5. 5 times 10 is 50, so I end up with x equals 50. Okay. Now I've saved one of the harder ones for last. This one is 1/2 y minus 6 equals 24. So I'm still going to start with the best friend. In this problem, it's of course the one that's not hooked up to the variable, which would be that, the negative 6, or the subtraction of the 6. The inverse operation would be add, so I'm going to add 6 to both sides. Now I have 1/2 y equals 30. Currently, my 1/2 is being multiplied by y. So the opposite of that would be to divide. Now hopefully at this moment you realize that you don't divide fractions. So what do you actually end up doing? Well, you should know that instead of dividing fractions, you multiply by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal is that number flipped. So the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2 over 1, which is going to get rid of this completely. But remember, if you multiply by the reciprocal here, you also have to multiply by the reciprocal here. So you end up with 30 times 2, which is 60 over 1. So I can just write that as y equals 60.